For those of you who are not watching this video on YouTube, what was just played was basically a video showing thousands of people inside of Spain in some of the largest cities pissed off because earlier this week a Spanish rapper was arrested, and the charges were that he criticized the monarchy and that he basically glorified both domestic and international terrorism. And now a lot of people are angry. And in that video, we saw people burning trash cans, throwing rocks at the police, and we saw riot police responding. And this is all because people are saying, on the left at least, that this is a violation of free speech. And today I just want to catch everyone up on why these protests are happening, who this rapper is, and also why the West especially is having this issue dealing with what is hate speech, what is inflammatory speech, and what is acceptable speech. So, hey everybody, I hope your day's going well. Alex Capitco here. And first off, I would like to give a shout out to my friend Maria in Spain. Her last name I'm not going to say, but she's the one who brought this story to my attention. And I think it's kind of interesting, you know? I always love to cover things inside of the country where I lived for almost 4 years, even if they're negative. But this also just reminds me that the US is not the only country that is grappling with how to deal with inflammatory speech right now. And I think it's just an interesting topic to kind of dive into, so let's do it. So before I get into kind of my own take of this, just a quick background is that over the last couple days, according to the BBC, things have gotten quite bad, specifically in Barcelona and Madrid, where dozens have been arrested, more people injured, and we've seen pictures of like flaming trash cans, rocks, police batons, riot shields, the whole picture, which is never a great look. And it's kind of sad to see. But so for the people who don't know, the guy who has kind of set all this off is Pablo Hasél, who is a pretty left-leaning Spanish rapper who has not been quiet about his criticisms of the Spanish government. And all of this basically escalated last week because Hasel in 2018 had some lyrics and tweets that called the Spanish president a mafia boss. And also, he basically supported ETA, which was a Spanish, I mean, let's just call it what it is. It was a terrorist group in the 80s and 90s from the Basque Country that carried out attacks against the Spanish government, and a lot of people died, and it was quite a damaging time in Spanish history. And also, he's been linked to tweets supporting Al-Qaeda, immigration policies, and very anti kind of right-wing and the Spanish government and monarchy, stuff like that. And so, after 2 years, he was, I guess, supposed to go to jail, and he barricaded himself inside of a university, Lleida University in northeast Spain. And along with 50 followers, or supporters, followers sounds kind of weird, but with those 50 people, they barricaded themselves in against the police for 24 hours, and finally it almost got pretty violent, and the police were able to get in and take him. And so now we've just seen a giant backlash against this, where a lot of people are saying, this is against free speech, and it kind of brings up a big debate inside of the country, and that's kind of where this gets more interesting, honestly. So now again, according to the BBC, he is facing charges which include, let me see here, assault, praising armed extremist groups, breaking into private premises, and insulting the crown. Okay, breaking into private premises, I agree with. That shouldn't have happened and shouldn't ever be allowed. And praising armed extremist groups gets a little gray. But, you know, insulting the crown, I'm okay with that. And assault, definitely not. So it gets convoluted because this guy's obviously not perfect. And I want to put that out clear, is that he's not just some saint who's getting locked up for no reason. Like, he's definitely spewed some unrest and some inflammatory language. But these protests have now changed from just criticizing this action against Hasel. And now it's kind of gone into a bigger criticism of how the Spanish government deals with criticism. And mainly a lot of these people are taking to the streets about the gag law. And according to El País, which is a great Spanish newspaper, and I guess it's also in English because that's where I got this part, but it talks about how this controversial legislation, which was passed in 2015 by the Popular Party, which is Pepe, which is, it used to be center-right, but I would argue it's definitely going closer to the far right. And basically it is supposed to protect safety and limit violence, but it also looks to quell protests and sharing photographs of police officers. Let me see what else it's basically supposed to help anti-corruption and peace, but instead it looks like it's quelling any protest that's against the Spanish monarchy, which a lot of people aren't happy with. Pepe has always kind of been on the side of the monarchy. They had a lot of leanings towards fascist Spain back in the day, so there's a lot of criticism coming out of that. And so I think the problem with the gag rule, just in theory, is that it's trying to clamp down on violent protests, but only when the right agrees with it. Because I remember being back in 2017 in Madrid when there was some violent protests going on. Basically, what happened was the Catalonian government wanted to hold an independence vote from Spain. And Puigdemont, who at the time was the leader of the party inside of Catalonia, held an illegal vote. He's currently in Brussels. He had to flee there, so clearly things didn't work out for him. But what happened is the central government inside of Madrid sent in the Guardia Civil to basically quell the vote and beat up protesters. And it looked really bad from a country with such a fascist history. And so that's my issue, is that where's the double standard in times like this, you know? And I agree that Hasel should not be supporting groups like Al-Qaeda or ETA, as they have done some really bad stuff, right? But he called the monarchy corrupt, and I think that's true. And I don't think that that should be as big of a deal as people are claiming it, you know, because actually at the height of the 2008 economic crisis, members of the royal family were literally embezzling taxpayer money. So honestly, when he called them mafia bosses, he's not really far from the truth. But the problem is there's such a double standard. So this gag rule, and now we're seeing it with the protests against this rapper, you know, the police are going in to stop people that are angry about this guy getting locked up for expressing his opinions, even as bad as they might be. But then again, there's also a rise in fascism, open Nazi rhetoric, anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers. And they've been out on the streets protesting or holding rallies, and there's no response about that. And I think a lot of Spanish people are just mad because of the double standard here, and rightfully so. For example, the Times of Israel had an article out today that talks about there were neo-Nazi rallies held over just last weekend in Spain. And they were doing the Nazi salute, and they were basically celebrating this so-called Blue Division, which was a unit of Spanish military volunteers that sided and helped the Nazis during World War II. And so, I don't know, I mean, I feel like openly allowing neo-Nazis to hold rallies without also trying to quash that shows a clear double standard to me. And I think that's why a lot of people in Spain are angry, because they're like, so we can't argue the fact that this guy is locked up for saying some bad things, but it is his free speech, but you're letting Nazis down the street basically hold rallies without any repercussions. And I can definitely understand why they're angry. And it's kind of interesting to me because there is a growing far-right, kind of fascist-aligned movement in Spain, mainly under the Vox party. And they just don't seem to get the same attention that far leftists get. And it's like you either need to treat them both the same and limit them, or let them do their thing, but you can't pick and choose. And to me, the other issue is that Spain is a really fractured country. You know, Hasel and others, you know, are from northern Spain. And there's a history there that isn't great, you know. Both the Basques and the Catalans have their own languages, they have their own cultures. And during, you know, Franco's regime in kind of the mid-1900s, he tried to repress them in a similar way to how the Chinese government's actually doing right now with, say, Hong Kong or Taiwan or Tibet. And so there's a lot of anger and, I think, repressed sadness in the north. And now the ETA, again, this was that Basque extremist group, were horrible and killed many people in the 80s and 90s. But it was a reaction to a lot of Franco's rule and this feeling that they could never be represented with their culture. And again, with Catalonia, the same thing when they tried to, you know, leave Spain in 2017. Though it was an illegal vote, it was met with such violence and hostility from Madrid that these people feel like they're strangers in their own country. And I'm not speaking for all of them, believe me. But I don't think it's good for the tensions inside of the country to quell protests that are against the central government, but allow the far right to basically have them. Yeah, so I think with Spain's just kind of troubled 20th century, people are just like, why the hell are you locking this guy up for clearly saying crazy things, but not treating the other side with the same justice? And, you know, with the violent 20th century that Spain had, I think you can't just punish one side and allow the other to do what they want. You know, I try to think about in the U.S., like, obviously this is a different example, but I try to think in the U.S., you know, what would happen if U.S. rappers were locked up for criticizing leaders, right? Like, I mean, YG had a song about Donald Trump that, to say nicely, wasn't very generous to him. NWA wasn't a big fan of the police. You know, country artists have called out both Bush and Obama. Like, if you use this same standard, like, it gets difficult, because what is just criticizing and what is calling for violence? And I think there needs to be a fine line that is applied evenly. And the Spanish government, by this right now, and the response of the Guardia Civil, along with riot police, to these protests right now, I think could be troubling for trying to bring that dialogue together. So I'll leave it there. I think we'll have to watch over the next couple weeks, see what happens. But it seems like Spain is grappling with a lot of similar issues that the US is right now, obviously for different reasons. But I think until there's a standard that is applied evenly to how you deal with inflammatory speech, things like this are just going to keep escalating. And I worry that we need to do something before it gets past repair. And it's something really serious. I don't think it's enough coverage. So, yeah, I think it just needs to be a discussion we have. So take care, and we'll be back next week. Bye, guys.